The 1980s promised visions of tomorrow, laser battles, dystopian nightmares, and alien encounters. But some films went too far, shocking censors, enraging governments, and vanishing from theaters. What happens when science fiction isn't just entertainment, but a threat to order, morality, and control? Tonight we dive into the forbidden vaults, sci-fi movies banned in the 80s, now resurfacing in their uncut glory. Hardware, 1990, but banned in the late 80s releases. Though technically released at the dawn of the 1990s, Hardware was an underground project that lived in the shadows of late 80s development. Its reputation, a low-budget post-apocalyptic shocker, dismissed by critics but worshipped by cyberpunk fans. The story follows a scavenger who unknowingly brings home parts of a self-repairing military droid. In a cramped apartment, the machine rebuilds itself into a relentless killing force. The danger wasn't just the gore, though its blend of industrial violence and claustrophobic terror was enough to make British censors sweat. The bigger issue, the film echoed real-world military fears. Some whispered it was inspired by Pentagon robotics research. Others claimed it symbolized government control, crushing ordinary citizens. Censorship boards in the UK and parts of Europe hacked away at scenes of mechanical mutilation and menace. At one point, the film teetered on the edge of an outright ban, its VHS circulation heavily restricted. Meanwhile, in the US, it was slapped with an X rating before finally being trimmed for theatrical release. Behind the scenes, director Richard Stanley battled distributors who wanted a safer, mainstream film. Instead, he doubled down on surreal brutality, even sneaking in cameos from Iggy Pop and Lemmy Kilmister. The result was chaos. Critics tore it apart. Audiences walked out, but a subculture embraced it as cyberpunk prophecy. Today, Hardware is finally available in its full, uncut version. Its grinding soundtrack and grotesque visuals intact. Watching it now feels like stepping back into a nightmare of the 1980s, one where technology was already turning against us. It's a reminder that censorship couldn't kill cyberpunk's warning. The future would be brutal, metallic, and unstoppable. Altered States, 1980. When Ken Russell directed Altered States, critics expected flamboyance, but no one was ready for the chaos. A Harvard scientist experimenting with sensory deprivation and hallucinogens. His obsession drives him to regress into primitive, pre-human states. The result? A kaleidoscope of imagery, writhing bodies, religious hallucinations, and violent transformations that shocked audiences. Its controversy hit immediately. American censors attacked the hallucinatory orgies and grotesque evolutionary sequences, trimming frames of skin and violence. Especially in conservative regions, entire reels were refused. Ireland banned it for its psychedelics. Some South American countries condemned it as blasphemy. Rumors even spread that it secretly endorsed psychedelic drug use during the Reagan War on Drugs. Behind the scenes, production was a battlefield. Author Paddy Chayefsky, whose novel inspired the film, hated Russell's over-the-top style and demanded his name removed from the script. Actors were pushed to physical extremes, with William Hurt enduring intense contortions inside sensory tanks. Liquid Sky, 1982. When Liquid Sky premiered in 1982, it was hailed as one of the strangest, most daring visions of New York's underground. A low-budget, neon-drenched sci-fi about aliens harvesting endorphins from humans during orgasm. But mainstream audiences and censors were horrified. They saw not art, but danger. A dangerous fusion of drugs and alien terror. The film's premise alone sparked bans. A microscopic UFO hovers over a Manhattan rooftop, drawn to the heroin-fueled nightlife of struggling models and musicians. Every encounter ends in death, as the alien vaporizes its prey. It was surreal, violent, and unapologetically queer in its aesthetic, a radical departure from safe Hollywood sci-fi. Censors in Canada, Australia, and parts of Europe banned or heavily restricted it, citing its immoral mix of drugs and psychedelic violence. The electronic score, created on primitive synthesizers, some hailed it as avant-garde genius, others dismissed it as unwatchable filth. The censorship only amplified its mystique, VHS bootlegs circulated in queer clubs and art schools, where it was whispered about as a forbidden classic. By the late 80s, it had essentially vanished from theaters, surviving only in underground screenings. Extro, 1982. In 1982, Extro emerged from Britain with a reputation so vile that tabloids branded it the most disgusting sci-fi film ever made. The story follows a man abducted by aliens who returns to Earth, and the parasitic horrors that follow shocked audiences, pushing boundaries even horror veterans weren't prepared for. Censorship boards went into overdrive. The British Board of Film Classification cut entire sequences, including the infamous birth scene, where an alien bursts from a woman in a shower of blood, while countries like Norway and Singapore banned it outright. Half sci-fi, half nightmare was deemed indecent and too psychologically disturbing for audiences. Critics savaged it as trash cinema, with Roger Ebert calling it a catastrophe. Yet, despite, or because of, this reputation, it became a cult object. Underground fans treasured the uncut versions smuggled on VHS, where the film's unhinged imagination could run free. The legacy of Extro is one of survival through controversy. Though critics buried it, audiences resurrected it as an emblem of forbidden sci-fi horror. The uncut version plays like a fever dream, a collision of alien dread, grotesque imagery, and 1980s nihilism. Censors tried to erase it, but in doing so, they made it unforgettable. Extro remains proof that the most reviled films often carry the most lasting power. Scanners, 1981. David Cronenberg's Scanners exploded onto screens in 1981. The film follows telepaths, scanners, whose psychic abilities turn into weapons of mass destruction. Its premise was terrifying, mind control as corporate warfare. But it was that infamous scene that turned censors against it. In Britain, the BBFC cut deeply, trimming gore from the exploding head and violent psychic battles. In several European countries, including Sweden and Germany, bans were issued, citing the film's brutality of the mind. Even in the US, distributors worried. Some theaters refused to show it uncut, fearful of backlash during the conservative climate of the early 80s. Behind the scenes, the chaos was just as real. Cronenberg raced to finish the script while shooting. Special effects crews worked frantically to perfect the exploding head sequence, eventually using a shotgun blast to achieve the gruesome effect. The intensity pushed the film to its breaking point, but the result was unforgettable. Audiences were divided. Some fainted. VHS versions circulated uncut, treasured by fans who wanted the raw impact censors tried to suppress. Scanners is remembered not just for shock value, but for its eerie vision of corporations weaponizing the human mind. Watching the uncut version is like reclaiming a piece of 1980s cinematic rebellion. It's a reminder that censorship only amplified its legend, and that sometimes a single exploding head can change movie history. The Thing, 1982. When John Carpenter's The Thing arrived in 1982, it was poised to be a sci-fi horror classic. Instead, it was met with disgust, bans, and backlash that nearly destroyed Carpenter's career. A group of Antarctic researchers battling a shape-shifting alien that mimics its victims, but it was the film's effects that pushed it into dangerous territory. Censors recoiled at Rob Bottin's groundbreaking practical effects, organs morphing into monstrous hybrids. Britain cut heavily for video release. Finland banned it outright, and Australia imposed restrictions. Accusing Carpenter of creating a film too vile for mainstream audiences, hospitalized from overwork while Stan Winston stepped in for backup. Carpenter fought studio interference, as executives panicked at early test screenings where audiences stormed out in horror. The result was commercial disaster. Critics panned it, audiences avoided it, and Universal quietly buried it. But censorship and failure couldn't kill its legend. Over time, fans resurrected The Thing, passing uncut versions through VHS circles. By the late 80s, it had become a cult phenomenon, its once condemned effects now hailed as revolutionary. Today, the uncut film is considered one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. Watching it uncut is like reliving a nightmare the world wasn't ready for. RoboCop, 1987. When Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop hit theaters in 1987, it looked like a pulpy action film about a cyborg cop. But beneath the surface, it was a savage satire on corporate greed, privatized policing, and media violence. The problem? Censors didn't see satire, they saw excess. The original cut was brutally violent. Criminals gunning down Murphy in excruciating detail. A corporate executive shredded by an out-of-control robot. Scenes of gore that lingered long after audiences could look away. The UK and Australia censored it heavily, while others whispered it glorified fascism. Behind the scenes, Verhoeven pushed the crew mercilessly. Practical effects were groundbreaking but dangerous. Squibs exploding, mechanical props malfunctioning, even minor injuries on set. At release, critics were divided. Some called it disgusting. Others praised its intelligence hidden beneath the blood. Audiences, though, couldn't get enough. Yet, fans who saw the theatrical version didn't get the full impact. Only bootleg tapes of the uncut director's cut circulated. Today, that uncut RoboCop is widely available, and its message has aged like prophecy. It's not just a violent sci-fi film. It's a grim forecast of corporate power. The censors tried to water it down, but all they did was confirm its warning. The system silences what it fears most. Blade Runner, 1982. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner is now revered as one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. But in 1982, it was considered dangerous, too slow, too bleak, and too radical in its vision of the future. Studio executives forced Scott to add narration and a happy ending. Meanwhile, abroad, censors hacked into its darker moments, trimming violence and softening its tone. Deckard hunting rogue replicants in a neon-soaked dystopia was already subversive. But its imagery of corporate towers, environmental collapse, and humans treated like machines made governments uneasy. The UK and Germany censored moments of violence. Japan restricted screenings, claiming it promoted nihilism. The true director's cut remained buried, whispered about in fan circles. Actors clashed with Scott, who pushed for perfection through endless takes. Studio interference grew so severe that Scott nearly lost creative control. When the film flopped at the box office, executives considered it proof they were right. Yet, fans who glimpsed test screenings of uncut versions knew there was something more. The aftermath turned it into legend. VHS bootlegs of the work print circulated, fueling rumors of hidden meanings and a darker, truer ending. By the 1990s, the director's cut restored Scott's vision, and decades later, the final cut solidified it as masterpiece. Watching Blade Runner Uncut today is like stepping into the future we fear we've already inherited. The censors tried to make it safe, but they couldn't erase its truth. The line between human and machine is thinner than we want to believe,